This is Atomic Biscuits, and I'm your host, BACFA. Welcome again, friends, to another episode of Atomic Biscuits. This is 2025-0105, Reflected Efforts. I'm going to start over at semaphore.com for Things We Got Wrong in 2024 by Max Tanney. The news media is wrong all the time, though not exactly as its loudest critics claim. Reputable outlets get most of the facts right and correct facts when they're wrong. In fact, one way you can tell a reputable American news media outlet from an untrustworthy one is who admits they're wrong and correct. Of course, when a big outlet makes a big error, it's a news event, the subject of lawsuits, public embarrassment, and critical coverage from their competitors and in newsletters like this one. More often wrong are the assumptions we in the information and content business make. Lacking in all the necessary information or a crystal ball, members of the media nonetheless post their takes on social media, pop off a little too much on a podcast, and let our biases seep into reporting and analysis, only to be surprised when life proves more interesting than we expected. At the end of 2023, we asked some of the most perceptive readers up and down and across media to share where they felt they missed the mark. That turned out to be one of your favorite editions, so we're bringing it back in 2024, a year with some notable news events that yielded some major unexpected twists. While last year's list varied, one of 2024's most consequential news events, Joe Biden's failure on the debate stage and subsequent decision to leave the presidential race, was clearly top of mind for many of our respondents this year. Semaphore's editorial style attempts to account for some of the biases that shape the media coverage by separating the facts we know from what we feel we know, our analysis and perspective. But, of course, we were caught by surprise and flat out wrong in some of our predictions and assumptions, which we've included below. Yet, despite the fact that we and others embarrassingly missed the mark on a few occasions, this remains one of my favorite newsletters of the year, precisely because it also shows what is, at its best, the healthiest feature of a free media, the willingness to reflect on misconceptions and to change course rather than digging in. With very few exceptions and just occasional self-promotion, everyone we reached out to shared their honest opinions about what they got wrong this year, from Biden's mental acuity to the influence of X on the election, to highway traffic on the way to viewing the eclipse. That was worse than the media advertised, as Pat Kiernan learned the hard way. What we got wrong. Andrew Ross Sorkin, co-anchor of Squawk Box and editor-at-large of New York Times Deal Book. Doge and the pairing of Elon and Vivek together was not on my bingo card for 24. David Remnick, editor of The New Yorker. One of the most lasting themes of Alexei Navalny's posthumous memoir is his insistence that dictatorships are more fragile than most people imagine. And in 2024, I was wrong. All of us were wrong about Syria. That is, the Assad regime having killed and tortured countless of his own people to stay in power not so long ago, suddenly disintegrated as quickly as a sugar cube in boiling water when it found itself without the support of a diverted and equally brutal Russia and a weakened Iran and its proxy Hezbollah. Navalny is right to have pointed out this is always on Putin's mind. He came to political maturity witnessing the sudden collapse of the Soviet Union and its imperium throughout Eastern and Central Europe, and as Russian president, has taken up arms with horrific results in Georgia and Ukraine, not only to subjugate those former republics of the old empire, but also to assert power at home. Steve Bannon. That Taylor Swift would make a bigger difference than she did with low propensity, low information voters. It was teed up, but she waved off. Contrary to early reporting by everyone from MSNBC to the WAPO, the Swifties were washing their hair on the 5th of November. Nicola Mendelsohn, head of Global Business Group, Meta. This whole category of AI glasses has taken off a lot faster than we expected. If you had asked us earlier, we would have said you'd need to wait for full holographic AR glasses in order for them to be a mainstream product. But with the impressive advances in AI, our Ray-Ban Meta glasses ended up being a bigger hit sooner than we expected. Rachel Maddow, anchor of MSNBC. I thought people would be more unnerved by J.D. Vance. Less the cat lady thing and more the Americans are going to have to get over their dictator phobia, Mencius Moldbug thing. Michael Sebastian, editor-in-chief, Esquire. I was wrong about how much getting dressed up actually took off. It's something Esquire champions and predicts, but if I'm being honest, I wasn't sure it could overcome the tyranny of athleisure. But I do hope it happens. And yet, you look around and see guys wearing versions of suits, actual trousers, hard shoes, and yes, even a tie. A major menswear designer just told me they've sold more suits this year than in the last decade. A menswear executive at a major department store said suits outsell sneakers. If you aren't already, it's time to start dressing up again. Caitlin Collins, anchor at CNN. 2024 served as the ultimate reminder to never assume what the news is going to be. We were surprised at almost every turn of this election, and as a reporter, you should always operate with an open mind. It's easy, but risky, to think you know where a story is going. This year reminded us that we don't. Shawnee Hilton, editor-in-chief, Civic News Company. The subscription model for local metro newspapers, where you pay a flat fee for access to a warehouse of information, isn't working the way I once hoped it would. For a while, it felt like a way to bring the business model into alignment with the core product, but the information people are subscribing for is widely available for free in a variety of places, and the model assumes individual loyalty and patronage to an institution, and we live in an anti-institutional time. What people have expressed they want is a good, clear, fast, free, actionable reporting on the home front that can help them make good decisions. After sitting on its board for several years, this year I went to work at a place that isn't under the illusion that subscriptions can save local news. Right now, we're seeing a shift towards sustained philanthropy for this type of journalism, which is focused on topics where there are actual gaps in information and isn't expecting you to pay for crime reporting when what you want is box scores. Mark Cuban, I was wrong about the election outcome. Dana Perino, anchor, Fox News. In 2024, I predicted that Taylor Swift and Travis Kelce would announce their engagement. I was so sure of this. Instead, they just teased us about it the entire year. So I got that one wrong. This year, I'm predicting that Taylor Swift will write a musical that will help save Broadway. I just don't know if it's going to be about a marriage or a breakup. Mehdi Hassan, founder of Zateo. 2024 was the year I posted my wrongest ever tweet. It's quoted here. I think Republicans will regret setting the bar so low for Biden and helping spread the distorted image of him as a guy who is totally out of it, suffering from dementia, no grip on reality, no ability to speak, a very low bar for him to clear tonight. End quote. A few hours later, he was promising to beat Medicare. A few weeks later, he had quit the race. Like many others, I was completely, utterly, totally, embarrassingly wrong about Biden's lack of mental competence. But I remain right about Trump's. Janice Min, editor-in-chief, The Ankler and CEO, Ankler Media. I started this year pessimistic about entertainment, that it was devolving into corporatized sludge, just sequels and IP universes in the end game of M&A Hollywood. But I'm ending the year optimistic. Historically, every one of these robber baron-style eras has given birth to independence, and insurgents into entertainment, and of course in other industries as well. Now the machinery of gatekeepers is being circumvented. YouTube, co-productions, direct brand deals, podcasts, and so on. The year ended on a rash of million-dollar spec script scales of original ideas penned by aspiring screenwriters, something not seen since the creative glory days of the 1990s. That tells me even traditional gatekeepers are hitting a wall on big, bloated A-list packages. Think flops like Apple's Wolves and factory-made entertainment. I think there are enough disruptive forces at play that by the end of the decade, we could look back and call it one of the golden eras in the industry. Tim Miller, host of the Bulwark podcast. I think I judged President Biden too generously for most of his term, and he revealed himself to be less concerned about protecting our democratic institutions than legacy. As a result, both will be badly tarnished. I thought Trump would have the juice to get Matt Gaetz through and was surprised he pulled out, so to speak. I thought the Nuggets would be able to overcome an off-season that was panned by the basketball pundits, and it seemed like my optimism was misplaced there. Rebecca Blumenstein, president of NBC News. The enduring power of inflation on politics. Even as unemployment rates were at historic lows and inflation subsided, many voters simply do not share a sense of optimism given the high prices of groceries, housing, higher education, and healthcare. That profoundly affected the presidential race this year. One of the most memorable segments we did was about how people in Nebraska often drive 2 hours round trip to a bakery in Omaha to save $2 on a loaf of bread. The lesson is that polls are just one tool, and that it's essential that journalists stay close to voters across geographically diverse areas. Justin Smith, founder and CEO of Semaphore. Semaphore was born global with international ambition at our very core. From our start in 2022, we prioritized a strategy of actively engaging with China. How could one be truly global and not? But after an initial 2023 effort to build an ambitious CEO convening in China failed, I thought that surely we would regroup and try again in 2024. It turned out my instincts were wrong and that the geopolitics of U.S.-China were far too complicated for a U.S. news organization to pursue anything consequential this year. I hadn't understood the depth of the corporate freeze between the two countries and the degree of difficulty required to build a bridge between U.S. and Chinese private sectors in 2024. Will we give up on this idea? Never. It's too important for the world, but it's not going to happen anytime soon. Alex Sherman, media reporter for CNBC. I thought Warner Brothers Discovery would get a small package of NBA games to continue Turner Sports' 40-year relationship with the league. While Turner did get some scraps from the league, the company's run carrying live games in the U.S. will end after this season. That surprised me. I also thought the San Francisco 49ers would beat the Kansas City Chiefs in the Super Bowl. That was dumb. Never bet against Mahomes. Jessica Lessin, founder and CEO of The Information. A year ago, I thought X might become less globally significant as it became overrun with fake news and conspiracy theories. Clearly, that hasn't happened. I also thought Bezos might sell the Washington Post, but I don't think there's any way that happens. He's all in. Stella Bugbee, styles editor for the New York Times. It wasn't so much that I got things wrong as that I lacked the imaginative capacity to predict the chaos of 2024. 2 assassination attempts on Trump, hawked to a crypto, learning that RFK Jr. left a dead bear cub in Central Park, then seeing him be nominated to run the Department of Health, and then immediately watching him question the polio vaccine. The mind boggles. Joanna Coles, Chief Creative and Content Officer from the Daily Beast. I was wrong when I said Lauren Sanchez was the perfect combination of Amelia Earhart, Brooke Astor, and Jennifer Aniston. In fact, she's a combination of Amelia Earhart, Brooke Astor, and Beatrix Potter. Andrew Essex, Senior Managing Partner, TCS Interactive. To me, the obvious answer, X. Like many, I foolishly scoffed at what looked like a legacy media business committing sell-side suicide. Turns out it was just transmogrifying into Elon's massive poo machine. ArsTechnica.com has Siri unintentionally recorded private convos. Apple agrees to pay $95 million. Apple users may get $20 each for up to 5 Siri-enabled devices. Apple has agreed to pay $95 million to settle a lawsuit alleging that its voice assistant Siri routinely recorded private conversations that were then shared with third parties and used for targeted ads. In the proposed class action settlement, which comes after 5 years of litigation, Apple admitted to no wrongdoing. Instead, the settlement refers to unintentional Siri activations that occurred after the Hey Siri feature was introduced in 2014, where recordings were apparently prompted without users ever saying the trigger words, Hey Siri. Sometimes Siri would be inadvertently activated, a whistleblower told The Guardian, when an Apple Watch was raised and speech was detected. The only clue that users seemingly had of Siri's alleged spying was eerily accurate targeted ads that appeared after they had just been talking about specific items like Air Jordans or brands like Olive Garden. Reuters noted claims which remain disputed. It's currently unknown how many customers were affected, but if the settlement is approved, the tech giant has offered up to $20 per Siri-enabled device for any customers who made purchases between September 17, 2014 and December 31, 2024. That includes iPhones, iPads, Apple Watches, MacBooks, HomePods, iPod Touches, and Apple TVs, the settlement agreement noted. Each customer can submit claims for up to 5 devices. A hearing when the settlement could be approved is currently scheduled for February 14th. If the settlement is certified, Apple will send notices to all affected customers. Through the settlement, customers can not only get monetary relief, but also ensure that their private phone calls are permanently deleted. While the settlement appears to be a victory for Apple users after months of mediation, it potentially lets Apple off the hook pretty cheaply. If the court had certified the class action and Apple users had won, Apple could have been fined more than $1.5 billion under the Wiretap Act alone, court filings show. But lawyers representing Apple users decided to settle, partly because data privacy law is still a developing area of law imposing inherent risks that a new decision could shift the legal landscape as to the certifiability of a class, liability, and damages. The motion to approve the settlement agreement said it was also possible that the class size could be significantly narrowed through ongoing litigation. The court determined that Apple users had to prove their calls had been recorded through an incidental Siri activation, potentially reducing recoverable damages for everyone. The percentage of those who experienced an unintended Siri activation is not known, the motion said, although it is difficult to estimate what a jury would award and what claims or classes would proceed to trial. The settlement reflects approximately 10 to 15% of plaintiffs' expected recoverable damages. Siri's unintentional recordings were initially exposed by The Guardian in 2019, plaintiff's complaint said. That's when a whistleblower alleged there have been countless instances of recordings featuring private discussions between doctors and patients, business deals, seemingly criminal dealings, sexual encounters, and so on. These recordings are accompanied by user data showing location, contact details, and app data. Horrified, Apple users sued, considering each recording an egregious breach of social norms that seemed to violate state and federal laws. They alleged that Apple's conduct was deliberate, arguing Apple commercially benefited from the secret recordings. Apple repeatedly moved to dismiss the suit, arguing that there are no facts, much less plausible facts, that tie plaintiffs' receipt of targeted ads to their speculation that Siri must have been listening to their conversations and Apple must have used Siri to facilitate targeted ads by third parties. Through the settlement agreement, Apple ultimately agreed that Siri unintentionally recorded private conversations and is likely hoping the settlement will finally end the controversy for good. Meanwhile, Google faces a similar lawsuit in the same district from plaintiffs represented by the same firms over its voice assistant, Reuters noted. A win in that suit could affect anyone who purchased Google's own smart home speakers, Google Home, Home Mini, and Home Max, smart displays, Google Nest Hub, and Nest Hub Max and its Pixel smartphones from approximately May 18, 2016 to today, a December court filing noted. That litigation likely won't be settled until this autumn. Apple did not immediately respond to R's request to comment. That's over at arstechnica.com by Ashley Ballinger. It's a bit ridiculous, but we know Liz Cheney and Benny Thompson going to get their medals like Olympic athletes from Biden for the January 6th witch hunt. There's this story over at thegatewaypundit.com. Surprise! House releases bombshell report on January 6th pipe bomber, revealing FBI engaged in massive cover-up and refuses to cooperate with investigators. This is by Christina Lala. A new report released by the Committee on House Administration Subcommittee on Oversight into the January 6th pipe bomber shows the FBI stopped looking for the suspect in 2021 and covered up evidence. The FBI is now refusing to cooperate with congressional investigators. In September, former Secret Service agent Dan Bongino said, according to a whistleblower, after the pipe bombs were found at the Republican National Convention and the DNC headquarters, assets on the ground, including a whistleblower, was briefed about the pipe bombs the next day and showed a picture of a guy in a hoodie. However, according to the whistleblower, the law enforcement agents were told to stand down 2 days later. But 2 days later, after the pipe bomb, he notes emphasis his without explanation, they were told to stand down. No need to look for the guy anymore, Bongino said. This directly contradicts previous statements by FBI Director Christopher Wray. Loudermilk released more information to back up Bongino's whistleblower report. Nearly 4 years later, federal law enforcement has yet to identify the individual responsible for planting the pipe bombs, which remains one of the unanswered questions from that day. In the early weeks of the investigation, the FBI took significant investigative steps, identifying multiple persons of interest, issuing search warrants, reviewing hours of security camera footage, and analyzing the components of the pipe bombs. Despite the threat the pipe bombs posed to Congress and the public and the role they played in diverting resources away from the Capitol, federal law enforcement has refused to provide substantive updates to Congress about the status of the investigation, Loudermilk's report stated. Loudermilk's report said that there has been conflicting information whether the FBI received corrupted cellular data from cell carriers. There is conflicting information as to whether the FBI received corrupted cellular data from the major cell carriers. A former senior FBI official testified that the major cell carrier companies provided corrupted cell data to the FBI and suggested that the corrupted data may have contained the identity of the pipe bomber. However, in responses to letters from the subcommittee, the major cell carriers confirmed that they did not provide corrupted data to the FBI and that the FBI never notified them of any issues with accessing the cellular data, the House report stated. For years, we've been told an unidentified suspect planted pipe bombs at the RNC and DNC headquarters on January 5th, the night before the Capitol riot. The FBI still can't find the person who planted the bombs. The U.S. Capitol was shut down on January 6th after the feds found the bombs near the Republican and Democrat Party headquarters. But did this so-called suspect actually plant the bombs the night before? Video recently released from January 6th shows a police officer carrying a bag toward the location of the DNC pipe bomb at 12:51 p.m. on January 6th, just 15 minutes before the explosive device was discovered by another officer. There's a link to that footage. Did this police officer place the pipe bomb next to the park bench on January 6th? Not one Secret Service agent saw the pipe bomb during a sweep of the building before Kamala Harris arrived that day. The bomb-sniffing dog that was brought to the location earlier in the day also didn't detect the bomb. Last year, January 6 footage released showed a highly trained bomb-sniffing dog somehow missing the DNC pipe bomb just a few feet away at approximately 9:51 a.m. that morning. And there's more footage. Additionally, Secret Service agents also miraculously didn't seem concerned that a deadly pipe bomb was discovered within close proximity to Kamala Harris. Harris's Secret Service detail arrived at 11:25 a.m. that morning and did not find the pipe bomb. That's because it was likely planted by the police officer 90 minutes later. Last year, Darren Beatty of Revolver News joined Tucker Carlson to discuss the J6 footage, showing how unconcerned Secret Service agents were after they found out about the so-called bomb. Darren Beatty said, "What's so shocking about the new footage is just how utterly unconcerned both the Metro PD and the Secret Service are about being informed that there was a pipe bomb literally within feet of them and within feet of their protectee, VP-elect Kamala Harris. Secret Service allowed children to cross the street toward the bomb several minutes after it was discovered under the park bench." Darren Beatty said, according to sources who've seen the extended video, bomb robots showed up several minutes later and dismantled and defused the pipe bomb. Thanks to new footage presented by Julie Kelly, overwhelmingly likely that the FBI surveillance footage is fake, and the bombs were actually planted not the evening before, but the day of January 6th, Darren Beatty said. That explains why no one, including the Secret Service, was able to find the bomb. It was planted later to be conveniently found along with the RNC bomb within a 15-minute time frame that perfectly coincided with unfolding Ray Epps' orchestrated breach of the Capitol, said Beatty. There is video proof the FBI is withholding critical footage that would show whether or not the pipe bomber planted the bomb when they said he or she did. Again, that's over at thegatewaypundit.com. Cybertruck bomber and New Orleans terrorist were both military veterans who served at the same base. That's the story posted over at One America News Network, OANN.com. This is by Blake Wolf. The now deceased man responsible for Wednesday's Cybertruck explosion in front of the Las Vegas-based Trump Hotel was a U.S. Army Green Beret who was previously deployed to Afghanistan twice, according to the Associated Press. The man also reportedly served at the same base as the New Orleans NOLA New Year's Day terrorist who drove a rented truck with an ISIS flag through a crowd of people in the early hours of the morning. Additionally, both him and the NOLA terrorist utilized the same company to rent their vehicles. 37-year-old Matthew Livesberger had parked his rented Cybertruck in front of Trump's Las Vegas hotel. The vehicle was full of firework-like explosives, eventually going off and injuring 7 bystanders near the blast. In addition to killing Livesberger, Metropolitan Police Department Sheriff Kevin McMahill explained that he was found dead inside the vehicle with a self-inflicted gunshot wound to the head, with the handgun found at his feet. Livesberger reportedly served in the Army since 2006, rising up the ranks through multiple deployments until he was able to serve in the Green Berets, a highly trained special forces unit working to combat terrorism. The former Green Beret was also awarded 2 Bronze Stars, along with a Valor device for courage under fire, a combat infantry badge, and an Army Commendation Medal with Valor. The FBI stated that it was conducting law enforcement activity at a residential address in Colorado Springs adding that the activity is related to the explosion in Las Vegas on Wednesday. Due to the ongoing nature of the investigation, no further information will be provided out of Denver. Livesberger's time in the military saw him working closely with critical intelligence capabilities in the Special Forces, allowing him access to highly sensitive military information. He was most recently stationed at Camp Panzer Kaserne in Germany, where he served as a remote and autonomous systems manager responsible for operations, maintenance, and integration of drones for the Army. Meanwhile, Livesberger has now been linked to Shamsud Din Jabbar, the radicalized terrorist and former Army veteran who killed at least 15 people on New Year's Day after ramming his truck into a crowd of people on Bourbon Street in New Orleans. Both men rented the vehicles they used to commit their attacks from Turo, a vehicle rental company, simultaneously attacking within a few hours of each other. Both men also served at Fort Bragg, now known as Fort Liberty. Another strange coincidence is that Jabbar and Livesberger also both reportedly lived in North Carolina at the same time, according to the New York Post. Las Vegas suspect inside Cybertruck identified as Matthew Livesberger, 37. However, law enforcement are waiting on DNA as the body was burned beyond recognition. They don't have any other person of interest. He drove from Colorado to Vegas. Motive unknown. That's by Stella Escobedo. That's just an interesting and eerie situation going on there. How many more wind-up dolls are we going to see? And are they ever going to figure out the difference between border control and mind control? This is over at OANN.com. Now, Breitbart has this article: Mosque attended by New Orleans terrorist refers FBI inquiries to CARE. The mosque reportedly attended by New Orleans terrorist Samshud Din Jabbar urged members to refer inquiries from the FBI to the Council on American Islamic Relations, or CAIR, C-A-I-R, and the Islamic Society of Greater Houston. More than a dozen were killed and dozens wounded in the terror attack in the early hours of New Year's Day on Bourbon Street, in which Jabbar drove a truck with an ISIS flag into a crowd of revelers. Newsweek reported a mosque near the Houston home of Shamsud Din Jabbar, who police say carried out the New Year's Day attack in New Orleans, has urged its congregation not to respond to media inquiries and to refer to other Islamic organizations if contacted by the FBI. In an Instagram story posted after the attacker's identity was announced, the Majid Bilal condemned what it said was terrible acts. It added, if approached by the FBI and a response is necessary, please refer to CARE and ISGH, referring to the Council on American Islamic Relations and the Islamic Society of Greater Houston. CARE is a radical organization that has provided assistance to terrorist families in the past. As Breitbart reported in 2015, the local branch of CARE provided help to the families of the ISIS-affiliated terrorists who carried out mass shooting against San Bernardino County employees, their colleagues, during a Christmas holiday party. Breitbart noted, last Friday, for example, Hussam Alouche, director of CARE's Los Angeles chapter, told CNN that the United States was to blame for provoking the attack through foreign policies Muslims found objectionable. Let's not forget that some of our own foreign policy as Americans, as the West, have fueled that extremism, he told CNN, listing several policy grievances. Not content with acting as a mouthpiece for the terrorists' perceived demands, CARE offered legal assistance to the family of the terrorists, appearing in court earlier this week to help Farouk's sister, Sayera Khan, who is eagerly awaiting to obtain custody of the 6-month-old baby that he and his wife abandoned before their attack. CARE issued a press release drawing attention to its role, almost as if legal assistance were a kind of death benefit offered to would-be terrorists, ensuring their children's welfare. Breitbart has also noted, in 2007 and 8, CARE was named an unindicted co-conspirator in the terror financing trial of the Holy Land Foundation for Relief and Development. That case, in turn, led the FBI to discontinue its work with the organization. In 2009, a federal judge ruled that the government produced ample evidence to establish the ties of CARE with Hamas, the Palestinian terror organization. The United Arab Emirates labeled CARE a terrorist organization in 2014, a decision that the Obama administration opposed. More recently, CARE Executive Director Nihad Awad said that he was happy about the October 7th, 2023 terror attacks in Israel. CARE issued a statement on the New Orleans attack on Thursday morning. We join the New Orleans Muslim community in extending our condolences to the families of those killed in the horrific, senseless, and infuriating Bourbon Street attack. May God comfort the families of the victims, heal the injured, and protect humanity from those who dare to commit such cowardly acts of mass violence. If reports that the perpetrator was a man with a history of drunk driving and spousal abuse who embraced Daesh are true, then his crime is the latest example of why cruel, merciless, bottom-feeding extremist groups have been rejected by the overwhelming majority of the Muslim world, from Islamic scholars to mosques to organizations and to individual Muslims. We strongly denounce this crime. We stand in solidarity with the people of New Orleans, and we encourage anyone with relevant information to come forward immediately, and we pray for a full recovery of those impacted by this crime. Anyway, that's over at Breitbart.com. The Daily Caller has this story: federal court terminates FCC's net neutrality regulations. This is by Marianne Angela. A federal appeals court on Thursday terminated the Federal Communications Commission's long-standing attempt to implement stricter regulations over the Internet. Net neutrality regulations require Internet service providers to facilitate access to all websites and content providers at uniform rates and speeds, irrespective of their size or the nature of their content. The Sixth Circuit Court of Appeals said the FCC does not possess the authority to regulate wireless and home broadband services under the regulatory framework that is historically applied to telephone services, according to the Wall Street Journal. The decision follows the Supreme Court's reversal of the Chevron deference earlier this summer, a legal precedent that allowed federal agencies broader discretion in interpreting ambiguous statutory language. The court's rejection effectively strips the FCC of its expanded interpretive reach. Reacting to the court's verdict, outgoing Democratic FCC Chairwoman Jessica Rosenworcel said the demand for fast, open, and fair Internet service persists among consumers. Rosenworcel, as the Wall Street Journal reported, said Congress should enshrine these principles into federal legislation. She also said the FCC's regulatory endeavors have reached an impasse. This policy, as the Wall Street Journal said, quickly became a contentious battleground. Telecommunication giants have opposed what they say is the potential for increasingly restrictive regulations. They said such efforts are a gateway to heavier-handed government control. Following the repeal of the Obama-era net neutrality rules in 2017, a series of legal challenges ensued, culminating in Thursday's definitive court decision, the Wall Street Journal reported. Rosenworcel had initiated a fresh rulemaking process in 2023, advocating for tougher regulations that she said would safeguard consumers and enhance federal cybersecurity measures. Industry representatives contested Rosenworcel's new regulations, leading to the Sixth Circuit Court's preemptive block on their implementation during the judicial review process, Wall Street Journal said. Republican FCC Commissioner Brendan Carr, who will soon assume the role of chair of the telecom regulator, applauded the court's decision. Carr has criticized the attempts to reinstate previously repealed regulations as futile and resource draining. Carr derided the Biden administration's reliance on what he termed the Chicken Little strategy, which painted a doomsday scenario about the Internet's functionality without net neutrality. The American people have seen through that ruse, Carr said. The court's decision comes after allegations that Congress wrongfully transferred its powers to the FCC. The FCC, together with a group of interest organizations and telecommunications firms, is challenging a lower court's decision that deemed this delegation unconstitutional. It threatens to undermine universal service programs that, for many decades, have served to promote the availability and affordability of critical communication services for millions of rural and low-income consumers, rural healthcare facilities, schools, and libraries across the nation, Consumers Research Group said in a statement. From RealClearMarkets.com, corporations clinging to DEI will lose social license to operate. This is by Stefan Padfield. Americans hate racial discrimination, and they hate inequality born of government force. However, if you try to solve the problem of inequality by engaging in Orwellian and neo-racist discrimination in the name of anti-discrimination, often advanced under the banners of anti-racism and DEI, which is diversity, equity, and inclusion, then you will sooner or later experience the wrath of the people. The recent judicial rebuke of NASDAQ's diversity rule adds to the drumbeat of feedback alerting companies to this fact. If corporations want to maintain their social license to operate, they must stop discriminating on the basis of race. In National Center for Public Policy Research, NCPPR versus SEC, the en banc U.S. Court of Appeals for the Fifth Circuit vacated the SEC's approval of NASDAQ's board diversity rules. I work for the National Center, and our excellent attorneys at the New Civil Liberties Alliance, the NCLA, describe the discredited rules as follows. These rules impose gender, race, and sexual orientation quotas on corporate board membership for NASDAQ-listed companies, compelling those that fail to meet their board seat quotas to explain why or face involuntary delisting from the stock exchange. You can read the National Center's press release as well as the NCLA's press release for more detailed analysis of the case, or links here. The short of it is that the SEC exceeded its statutory authority in approving the rule because the rules advanced none of the express purposes of the governing statute, but were instead a thinly veiled attempt to shame corporations into advancing the forced neo-racist social engineering that's become so popular as anti-racism the past few years. In reading some of the subsequent analysis, I was particularly struck by Professor Ann Lipton's conclusions. In part, Lipton writes that, I tend to agree that the diversity disclosure rule is not, in fact, intended to help investors price securities or even to adopt governance practices that contribute to wealth creation. It is more in the category of the kind of rule that serves a kind of signaling function that the corporation is exercising its power responsibly and inclusively. It's a display of self-governance and discipline in a manner that costs corporations very little, but perhaps wins them legitimacy. It benefits companies and investors, but not in the traditional manner by which securities law operate. It does so by contributing to their social license to operate. It's worth noting that Lipton, with whom I used to co-blog at the Business Law Professor blog, and who is an excellent scholar, does not even try to defend the diversity rule with the worn-out, diversity is good for the bottom line, which has by now been thoroughly debunked to the point that the SEC itself could not mount a defense on that basis, though that doesn't stop DEI advocates from continuing to claim that business case for diversity has been proven, which is a lie. Lipton goes on, however, to argue that diversity disclosures support a corporation's social license to operate. Problem with this assertion, however, is that it boils down to arguing that racial discrimination is good for society. But once one sees through the lovely sounding diversity, equity, and inclusion mantra, one is left with the unmistakable conclusion that what is going on in the name of DEI is nothing short of sorting people into buckets based on their race and other related identity categories, and then allocating resources like jobs, promotion, and financial support on that basis. While it has indeed taken Americans some time to figure this out, they have now done so, and corporations are quite properly dumping DEI fast. But not all corporations, of course. In reporting on the NASDAQ ruling, it's been noted that the Big Five, the Big Three asset managers, BlackRock, Vanguard, and State Street, together with the Big Two proxy advisory firms, ISS and Glass Lewis, still push corporations to allocate resources on the basis of race and sex in various ways. For a more specific example, one need look no further than Goldman Sachs, which denies its IPO services to companies that don't meet Goldman's neo-racist social engineering vision. In 2021, the bank upped the requirement to 2 diverse board members, including at least 1 woman. In other words, straight white male boards just don't go to the back of Goldman's IPO bus. They aren't even allowed in. In 2020, we were told a reckoning was coming. Well, it's now 2024, and the terms of that reckoning have changed. Corporations that continue to force anti-racist neo-racism on their employees and other stakeholders will be left facing boycotts and lawsuits that will materially harm their bottom line, and don't let them tell you they weren't warned. They were. Finally, let's keep in mind that addressing inequality doesn't require neo-racism. Instead, progress can be made by focusing on socioeconomic status or geographic and viewpoint diversity. It's time corporations stopped dividing us on the basis of race and got back to uniting employees around the common goal of providing the best products and services so that the poverty eradicating engine of free market capitalism can continue to maximize the spread of prosperity. That's over at realclearmarkets.com. Biden returns from vacation with unexplained injuries, wild remarks. This is the story by Nick Arama over at redstate.com. As we reported, Joe Biden came back from St. Croix about 5 days there. Then he had a little more vacation, spending New Year's Eve at his home in Wilmington, Delaware. Next, he went to Camp David on New Year's Day. His son Hunter was also on the vacation with him. Even with the two attacks in Las Vegas and New Orleans, Biden didn't come back to Washington on Wednesday, although he did make some brief remarks from Camp David. He didn't take any questions. On Thursday, Joe finally arrived back at the White House with his wife, as well as Hunter's wife, and son, Beau. Some pictures from Twitter on here. Newsmax's James Rosen had some questions about Biden's remarks at Camp David, or more exactly, why he was slurring even more than usual for him, and why he had apparently injuries on his face, including a cut around his lip and an apparent bruise on his chin. Did he take a header or a fall, or did something else happen? According to Rosen, the White House refused to explain the injuries. Rosen said the White House also canceled a press briefing they had on their schedule for Thursday. As we reported earlier, Biden, or an intern, posted that he had a meeting with his Homeland Security team and Kamala Harris to discuss where they were on the terrorist attack in New Orleans and the car explosion in Las Vegas. He said they were trying to get to the bottom of things. Then Biden himself did make some remarks about the attacks after that meeting. He repeated that at this point the authorities thought the New Orleans attacker was a lone wolf, and that he claimed there was no connection between the Las Vegas and New Orleans cases, despite the Turo app rental and both being at Fort Bragg. The remarks that Rosen pointed out appeared to be less visible, but he did have a lot of slurring. He spoke about the attacks for the first few minutes and then went on to talk about something else. Many also took issue with the jocularity of this part of the remarks right as he was finishing talking about the attacks, where Biden said he had to get this darn thing done because the Sugar Bowl was going to kick off shortly. Then he smirked and sort of winked. Just incredible. Maybe not the way to communicate you're serious about the attacks and finding answers when you're checking your watch and wanting to just get out of there. That's, again, Nick Arama over at redstate.com. I'm going to round off this week with this article from Brownstone Institute, brownstone.org. Australia's misinformation bill is dead for now. This is by Marianne Demasi. It is official. The Australian government's attempt to ram through legislation to combat misinformation online has been blocked after the Greens Party announced it would not support this controversial bill. We're concerned this bill doesn't actually do what it needs to do when it comes to stopping the deliberate mass distribution of false and harmful information, said Greens Senator Sarah Hanson-Young. This unexpected move is said to be the final nail in the coffin for the bill that intended to grant the media watchdog unprecedented regulatory powers to oversee digital content and determine what is misinformation. During this week, an interesting display of parliamentary dynamics unfolded as an array of senators announced they would oppose the bill one by one. Senators Lydia Thorpe, Tammy Tyrell, David Pocock, Jackie Lambie, Gerard Rennick, Fatima Pyman, and others declared their opposition. Their reasons varied from concerns over government overreach and vague definitions of misinformation to the implications for political discourse and the potential for misuse. Each statement chipped away at the bill's support, creating a domino effect. An urgent call to action resulted in significant public outcry. Australians concerned about their digital rights flooded senators with emails, petitions, and social media campaigns. The sheer volume of these communications likely played a crucial role in shaping the senators' views. The vigorous debate also garnered international attention. Michael Schellenberger, an American author and free speech campaigner, visited Australia to warn that these totalitarian laws would have implications for democracy and blur the line between regulating harmful content and stifling dissent. According to Schellenberger, misinformation should be countered with more and better information, not through suppression or censorship. Elon Musk, whose influence in the digital sphere is undeniable, especially after taking the helm of X, expressed similar views and has been vocal about his disdain for what he perceives as overreach in digital governance, labeling the failed bill as fascist. It's not quelled the government's enthusiasm for its proposed ban of social media access for individuals under 16. This bill, which introduces a mandatory age verification process, has implications for digital identity and privacy. The rapid legislative push on Thursday allowed only a 24-hour window for public submissions and moved to fast-track the controversial legislation without due public scrutiny. The bill would also require all Australians to undergo identity verification to use social media, raising alarms about the collection and potential misuse of personal data. The process could involve gathering biometric data, posing a risk for data breaches or misuse. Today, Musk described the legislation as a backdoor way to control access to the internet, which promises to punish platforms, including X, with steep fines if they allow children under the age of 16 to hold social media accounts. The combination of these legislative proposals, the misinformation bill and the digital ID for under 16s, paints a picture of a government intent on tightening control over what you can say and read online. After this week's news, the Labour government must now retreat and reassess. It could decide to abandon the legislative approach altogether and focus on other means like public education campaigns or working with social media platforms on voluntary codes of practice, but this is unlikely. The government will probably go back to the drawing board either to revise the bill with a more stringent protection for free speech or to explore alternative, less direct methods of addressing misinformation, hoping to revive the bill in the new year. Again, this is published from the author's Substack. You can find the links and all this information over at brownstone.org. That's all the time we have for this episode of Atomic Biscuits. I hope you'll tune in the future for new episodes coming up. I'm looking forward to the inauguration. I hope you are as well. From the beautiful Emerald Coast of Florida and in the Western Caribbean in the week ahead, this is BACFA. Have a great week, everybody.